item number 61, private member's notice of motion number 43. Mr. Wilson.
The member for Simcoe Grey.
Thank you, Speaker. I move that in the opinion of this House, the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care should immediately approve the planning grants requested by the Collingwood General Marine Hospital in the town of Collingwood and the planning grant requested by Stevenson Memorial Hospital in the town of New Tecumseh, allowing both hospitals to proceed respectively with much-needed redevelopments.
Mr. Wilson has moved private member's notice motion number 43. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to start by thanking the many people from Simcoe Grey. I think we had 98 people come down this afternoon to watch this debate. I thank you for being here. I certainly commend your civil action, and if the government doesn't vote for it, I won't encourage you to be civil anymore. These people have taken the time out of their busy lives to show their support. I hope the government takes notice today. I also want to thank the some 3,000 people in my riding who have taken this time to sign a petition for either the Collingwood Hospital or the Alliston Hospital, and I think I saw one or two sign both, Madam Speaker. Their voices are being heard here today. Madam Speaker, I rise on a matter of great importance to the people of my riding. As members in this House will know, Simcoe Grey is the home of two hospitals, Collingwood General and Marine Hospital and Stevenson Memorial Hospital in Alliston. Collingwood Hospital was built in the late 1950s. Stevenson Memorial Hospital was built in the early 1960s. The infrastructure is old and outdated and badly in need of redevelopment. There is a lack of space and storage, and as a result, patients and equipment are overflowing into the hallways. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that patient care at these hospitals is in any way substandard. This is certainly not an issue, as compassionate, tender-loving care is the norm at each hospital. The hospitals are staffed by incredibly caring, talented, and well-educated individuals, and they are supported by a legion of dedicated volunteers. These same volunteers help fundraise for our hospitals, and in doing so, they so very often contribute their own money. All of the stakeholders in some fashion, are all working towards the common goal of getting Ministry of Health approval for redevelopment. But, Madam Speaker, what these two hospitals need now, what the government can help with today, is approval of the hospital's planning grant requests. Now, let me tell you a bit more about these two hospitals in my riding and about the enormous efforts they have already gone to in the process of putting together the redevelopment applications. And just so you know, the information I'm going to read today is being provided directly from the hospitals. So it won't be one of my usual partisan speeches, Never. Collingwood General and Marine Hospital is a 60-bed facility on a journey to build a new hospital for its patients which reside in the South Georgian Bay region of Clearview Township, Collingwood, the Blue Mountains, and Wasaga Beach. The hospital serves more than 60,000 permanent residents, in addition to the 3.5 million visitors who visit the Georgian Triangle each year. Many of these visitors are right here in the GTA. The hospital's redevelopment journey began in the fall of 2014 on Stage 1 of the 5-stage application process called the Master Program Master Plan. Planning teams consisting of more than 100 staff and physicians spent a year working diligently on the Master Program, a document which defines the future programs and services needed in the new hospital, and the Master Plan, which identifies the physical space needed for a new hospital. Multiple rounds of community education and engagement sessions were held in all 4 communities. After 2 years and much hard work, the hospital submitted its complete Stage 1 application to the Capital Branch of the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care on September 30th, 2016. After a rigorous site evaluation process and with community input, the hospital board has identified a preferred site in the town of Collingwood on Poplar Side Road. The Poplar site, adjacent to the local community college, will allow a new regional hospital to become an even more significant player, as it will facilitate a higher probability of achieving the hospital's greater vision of being one of the first medium-sized hospitals in the province to become a true learning campus that will better prepare our next generation of healthcare providers to obtain the skills required to better function in medium-sized healthcare operations. With exponential growth and no room, the redevelopment project needs to get underway for the following reasons. The current hospital was developed in the 1950s, with subsequent additions and renovations in the 1960s, 70s, 90s, and 2000s, and is out of space. Most non-clinical staff have moved into external modular buildings in order to free up every inch of hospital space for patient care and clinical needs. The hospital has 4 portables to deal with the constant overcapacity. Many of the major building systems will require renewal within the next few years. That's an expensive ongoing. Due to inadequate floor-to-floor heights and floor plate sizes, the building is ill-suited to meet current clinical standards. Structurally, the hospital is unable to add additional floors to the existing building for growth. Due to poor area layouts, there are inefficiencies in staff time and a general sense of frustration. When orange is required, the hospital has a single flight path for helicopters. Currently, safety regulations call for 2 flight paths. Power lines surrounding the hospital building are at a height that interferes with the flight path. As the helicopter lands, and this is something to see, I've seen it myself, the emergency department has to turn off the ventilation system as the landing site is so close the fumes would otherwise enter the building. From a clinical perspective, there are great challenges. There are substandard facilities in the emergency department for patients with mental illness or addiction issues, as some patients remain a number of days. There is no space in the dialysis unit to expand. In order to accommodate 2 additional dialysis chairs, a closet was actually converted into a patient care area in the fall of 2015. There's a lack of patient confidentiality due to the open concept areas, divided by curtains instead of private rooms and recovery areas, and poor visibility to patient areas for nursing staff. There's a lack of family support facilities, such as quiet interview rooms and lounges for families when in a time of crisis. You literally have to have your family meeting in the hallway, amongst all the gurneys and equipment. For all of these points mentioned, it's imperative a redevelopment be approved in the near future. Madam Speaker, next I want to talk about Stevenson Memorial Hospital in Alliston. Again, this brief was provided by the hospital. Stevenson Memorial Hospital is a 38-bed progressive acute care community hospital serving South Simcoe. It has received strong community support for its plans to construct a new hospital facility that will better serve the community's growing healthcare needs. The hospital is dedicated to revitalizing and redeveloping the facility to meet the needs of a community that has outgrown a facility that was constructed in 1964 and has had no major renovations since. The 4,000 square foot emergency department was made to accommodate 7,000 visits per year, yet in 2016-2017, Stevenson saw over 36,000 patients in its emergency room. The facility is attempting to handle over 5 times the level of visits it was designed to handle. Stevenson is committed to upgrading its emergency department. It is the most relied upon and essential service at the hospital, accounting for over 50% of the total visits to the hospital. Alliston needs a facility that is over twice the size of Stevenson today. The emergency department is hard-pressed to meet the needs of the community, and without addressing this, the community could be put at risk, especially if there's a critical outbreak of infectious disease in the future. And there are other reasons the redevelopment of the hospital is necessary. The hospital has emergency patients on stretchers in the hallway. This is not optimal care. The hospital's current HVAC system is below industry standards. Birthing suites need to be modernized, giving women in the community services that reflect best standards set by the province. Mental health services in the Mary McGill building are developed in a building that does not meet accessibility standards set by the province and challenges the cornerstone of privacy and dignity of patients. The hospital building has problems meeting the fire code. There are frequent fire and safety infractions because medical equipment has to be stored in the hallway. The hospital's electricity systems are at capacity, and newer technologies require upgrades. Parking at the hospital is at overcapacity. The ORs are severely dated and small for modern-day surgical practice. And the best answer to these issues is a redeveloped facility with modern infrastructure and services. These services would include a new emergency department and OR facilities, diagnostic imaging and lab, and refreshed inpatient and outpatient clinics. Stevenson Memorial Hospital Foundation fully supports the efforts to develop the hospital and can meet the local share requirement of $30 million. By 2031, the population Stevenson will serve is expected to grow from its current 55,000 to over 90,000. The hospital services will be even more in demand because a large percentage of that 90,000 will be of an older demographic, making it even more critical that we get underway with the renovations and upgrades Stevenson needs. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I'd also like to mention that this hospital was recently recognized with an exemplary standing from Accreditation Canada for its operations. The hospital's operations were assessed and measured against national standards of excellence. Of the standards assessed, the hospital impressively met 1,782 of them. Only 18 were not met, and 51 were not applicable to that hospital. They met 100% of the required organizational practices. Madam Speaker, I hope this provides a good picture of the needs of the two hospitals in the short time that I'm allocated today. What I'm asking members of this House for today is this: support my resolution that calls for the immediate approval of the planning grants for Collingwood General and Marine Hospital and Alliston Stevenson Memorial Hospital. This is not a partisan issue. This is about planning for the healthcare needs of Ontario today and in the future. And I'd ask all the government members, I know it may be difficult to vote for expenditures in other people's ridings, but we are all here, and particularly government members, to represent all the people of Ontario, as my predecessor George McCaig would remind us if he were here today. And I want to thank the government. Up to this point, you've let us go through stage one, but, Madam Speaker, each hospital to get to stage one has had to spend, in the case of both hospitals, spent slightly over $1 million of their own money. So they've had to use frontline patient care money in order to put the studies together and the applications together. We can't go to stage two, let alone get all the way to stage 5, without a few $1 million each for each hospital. Today, we were encouraged during question period by the Minister of Health to continue, but that's not possible without sending the checks. So we're not asking for the hundreds of millions that these two buildings will cost eventually, simply asking for the planning grants. We're willing to raise the money locally. We've got wonderful communities that fully support their hospitals. I hope you'll fully support us today.
Further debate. I recognize the member from Toronto Danforth.
Speaker, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to stand and speak to this today. Mr. Wilson, the member from Simcoe Grey, has spoken very clearly. He's spoken about the deficiencies that exist with these hospitals, deficiencies that have to be corrected. Now, as you may well be aware, Speaker, our health critic, the member from Nickel Belt, has spoken extensively about the shortcomings in the hospital systems in this province. How many hospitals don't have adequate facilities? How many hospitals put people in hallways? And frankly, she recently referenced a hospital where people in gurneys were pushed into a shower area. That was the accommodation that was available. I had an opportunity a year ago to talk to one of my colleagues in Thunder Bay, the Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Centre, or Health Services Centre. Their hospital was at something like 110% capacity. They had people on stretchers, on gurneys, in the television rooms. They had them in whatever indoor space they could possibly stuff them in so that they didn't get rained on. And that was the level. They don't get rained on, that's good. They're indoors, they aren't freezing, that's good. But I think what the member has raised here, with the extensive list of problems that he's outlined, it's clear that investment has to go into these hospitals. I'm not the person you would normally have speaking on rural hospital investment. But I have seen in Toronto situations in hospitals where people have been forced into hallways, kept there for extended periods of time. And it doesn't matter where you are in Ontario, you deserve a standard of health care that is acceptable to everyone. And because you're in a rural area doesn't mean that we can do that work or provide those services on the cheap. People in every community in Ontario deserve the same high-quality standard of health care, and Simcoe Grey is no exception. The member went through a list of a number of deficiencies in those hospital buildings, and I agree with him. My guess is the staff do the absolute best they can. They would do for the patients everything within their power. but there's a limitation on what you can do when the buildings you're operating in are no longer providing the context, the environment in which the proper job can be done. The member noted a number of problems. He noted the inadequate floor-to-floor heights and floor plate sizes in the building, making it ill-suited to meet current clinical standards. And, Speaker, in my riding, what was formerly the Riverdale Hospital, a rehab hospital, Speaker, you're well aware of the building I'm talking of. It was a good building in its time, in the 50s and 60s, and my guess is this hospital was a good building in its time. But standard of care has changed. Our knowledge of what it takes to give people proper care, and you're familiar with the medical system, Speaker, to give the right amount of space for the movement of equipment and provision of care to patients means you have to have a different design. It isn't just putting equipment into a space. You need a space that's appropriate for that equipment. The list of deficiencies in this hospital includes a no direct connection from the medical device repurposing apartment to the operating rooms, saying that staff then have to use the same block of elevators as the general public. And frankly, if you're going to make sure that equipment is clean, sterile, and really provides people with the service they need, you have to have that change. When you look at their list of deficiencies, lack of storage, overflowing into halls. So halls, which would generally be used for storage of patients, don't have the room for equipment. Now, it shouldn't be. Halls shouldn't generally be used for storage of patients, but given what's been said, that's probably where they are, and they're cheek by jowl up against janitorial supplies and other material. Crowding the main entry at registration due to small space. You shouldn't have that. You just shouldn't have that. The space should be adequate for purpose so that people have a good experience from the moment they arrive till the moment they leave. We want them to come out healthy. We want them to be treated properly. They deserve to be treated properly. In addition to the problems that were outlined by the member, there's poor visibility to patient areas for nursing staff. Well, why wouldn't you have proper visibility? You know, it makes sense. If you're going to give people a high level of care, medical staff have to be able to survey all the patients that are there and be able to look after them. Noting, again, from the list of deficiencies, I'll go to the Stevenson Memorial Hospital. If you look at the list of deficiencies, the hospital's current HVAC system, HVAC system, is below industry standards. Standards change, equipment ages. Now's the time to bring it to modern standards so that people get the right temperature of air, the right level of humidity, consistently, so that they're assisted in getting better. One of the things that was noted was the services in the Mary McGill building. Currently, that building has a lot of asbestos in it. My guess is that it's been isolated, but if you're actually going to do the work that's required to ensure there's proper space, you're going to have to deal with that. And, Speaker, I've dealt with asbestos before when I was a property manager. It ain't cheap. It just is not cheap. There's no question that those people in those buildings deserve good quality, they deserve modern equipment, and they deserve it now. So I want to thank the member for bringing forward this bill. I know it's his riding, but I think there's a principle here, and I talked about it earlier. Everyone in Ontario should have access to a high quality of medical care, and it doesn't matter where you are, the quality of care has to be the same. Thank you, Speaker.
Here's further debate. I recognize the member from Barrie.
Well, thank you, Speaker. It's great to get up and speak on this issue. My colleague, the MPP from somewhere in the other side of the county, Simcoe Gray, and I have, I think, a pretty good working relationship, and he knows that I have been over there to visit him many times, and I hope to be there many other times. And this indeed is not a partisan issue, as he stated, but there is a process involved. Infrastructure doesn't appear overnight. All Ontarians, I agree with my colleagues, deserve access to high-quality, publicly funded health care. Nobody does not agree with that. We're investing in pharmacare, hospitals, home and community care, long-term care, mental health, and in our world-class health care professionals, and that's important. Including $9 billion to support the construction of new major hospital projects across the province. Our government is committed to making capital investments across the healthcare sector, and we will continue to work with our healthcare partners to assess needs based on sound fiscal planning and guided by priorities for the healthcare system. All decisions our government makes regarding hospital and capital funding is based on the best evidence available to us. And I do know that in both areas that we're talking about, there is growth. I know that, and there's good reason for it, and it's good news. Our government assesses many factors such as community need, growth, hospital condition, and local health care needs when reviewing capital submissions. We also work with the local hospitals and community to follow a structured process for hospital infrastructure planning and development. And a process, of course, means step by step. And sometimes you're not able to skip steps in processes. The Ministry of Health has received the capital submissions for both hospitals mentioned in this motion, Collingwood and Alliston, and our government is taking the necessary steps to assess both projects. I was very pleased when I made my announcement about the additional money to hospitals to have the CEO from Collingwood there, and who was quite pleased about the money he was getting. Alliston was not there that day. I think I've made a couple of phone calls over the last year there with good news, and that news was well received. We will continue to work with both hospitals, the local LHIN, and local health care partners to ensure local residents have access to the care that they need. Between June 2015 to July 2016, the Ministry, the LHIN, and the Stevenson Memorial Hospital were actively engaged in the review of Stage 1 proposal submission. The capital planning and review process typically involves multiple exchanges to ensure that the Ministry and the LHIN concerns are addressed such that all factors that could affect a proposed project are satisfied prior to proceeding with detailed planning. The LHIN board endorsed Stage 1 Part A, which is program and service elements, on September 27, 2016. While the Ministry's review does not constitute Ministry approval for the project or an approval to move to the next stage, the Ministry remains committed to making capital investments across the healthcare sector and will continue to work with the LHIN to assess needs based on sound fiscal planning guided by its priorities for the healthcare system. The Collingwood General and Marine Hospital, since March 2016, the Ministry has met with CGMH to receive updates on their planning activities. The hospital has worked with the LHIN in preparing the Stage 1 proposal submission and submitted it to the Ministry in September 2016. The submission is currently under Ministry review. At this time, there is no agreement on the project scope or Ministry approval for the replacement hospital proposal to move forward. However, again, while the Ministry's review does not constitute Ministry approval for the project or an approval to move to the next stage, the Ministry remains committed to making capital investments across the healthcare sector and will continue to work with the LHINs to assess needs based on sound fiscal planning guided by its priorities for the healthcare system. The Ministry's Health Capital Division receives proposals for capital projects from health service providers via their respective LHINs and reviews planning submissions at various stages of development to ensure the proposed project is developed in accordance with provincial standards. Again, all Ontarians deserve high-quality, public-funded health care. Unfortunately, all infrastructure can't be taken care of all at the same time, and as I said, there is a process. Our government is making the important investments our healthcare system needs, and if the member from Simcoe Grey thinks that our government should invest more in Ontario Hospital, then perhaps he and his colleagues should have voted for the budget. Thank you.
Here, further debate. I recognize the member from Elgin Middlesex London. Order.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'm proud to rise and support my colleague from Simcoe Grey, Jim Wilson, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. And as health critic of the party, I am fully supportive of this request from Mr. Wilson. We look at him in our caucus as a true leader of our party, not only serving as House Leader since I've been elected at this legislature, but in the meantime he did serve as our interim leader. And I do commend he did an amazing job in that year that he served. But we also have to remember that Mr. Wilson served as Minister of Health and Minister of Energy during his time, and Minister of Environment as well. He has a wealth of knowledge and understanding of how the government operates and what problems do arise. And I think this request he's brought forth for the Collingwood General Marine Hospital and the Stevenson Memorial Hospital is to help the communities pay for the process in order to get to the final stage to get the approval to build these new hospitals. I don't think that's a lot to ask, especially when you're going to smaller communities in the riding, for them to come up with millions upon millions of dollars. And this money doesn't come out of trees. It comes either out of the donations of their communities and or what's happening right now, their operational costs. And whether the government opposite mentions their investment in the hospitals, we do know the true fact is much of that money they're putting in isn't going to the base operating costs of the hospitals in this province. So it's going to continually degrade the system. And now we have a system where the members of the Collingwood Hospital especially is going to be pulling out funds from their operating costs to do the process from the bureaucracy created in this government. And we only have to look out so far as when this member from Simcoe Grey was the Minister of Health, he had 3 deputy ministers working under him. The current assistant deputy minister. This government has over 20 working in the bureaucracy of the Ministry of Health. That is money that could be going to the front line. That is money that could be going to the rebuilding of our hospitals. But instead, it's stuck inside the ministry being spent on themselves, creating a process which is costing the operating costs of the system to pay for the process. It's regardless. But, Madam Speaker, I toured.
Okay, it's never too early to warn or name anybody. And you know who you are. You have already been warned. I'm going to return to the member from Elgin Middlesex London.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I toured Collingwood last year. A member from Simcoe Grey brought me up, and I saw the portables that they have to deal with working in. The staff I met, the management and the clinicians, top-notch, wanting to do the best job they can. But we need to have a government that supports that, and that's why we're supporting this resolution, so they can move on with the process. Madam Speaker, the area is growing with tourism. The hospitals have to be prepared for the influx of people in the summer and in the winter months due to problems occurring either on the ski slopes or in the water. And we're hoping that this government can move this situation on further, because the last thing we would hate to see, is another SARS epidemic perhaps hitting the area and these hospitals being unable to provide the service because they're still dealing with facilities back from the 1950s and 60s. So, Madam Speaker, I'm urging the government to support the legislation brought forth by the member from Simcoe Grey. The PC caucus supports this resolution. Let's get the grant money to these communities so they can go forward and get these hospitals built. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Further debate. I recognize the member from Timiskaming Cochrane.
Thank you, Speaker. It's always an honour to be able to stand in this House. And today to support the motion put forward by the member from Simcoe Grey. First of all, I disagree many times philosophically with the member of Simcoe Grey because this is a partisan place. But I have had the opportunity. I have had I have had the opportunity to work with him many times because he has been House Leader and I'm the whip of our party. And I've learned a great deal from him from his many years of work in this place. And as all of us, he has a very in-depth knowledge of his riding and of the people he represents. And I truly appreciate having dealt with him. And on top of that, he has got an incredible sense of humor. He does. And he is very good at doing what he is doing today. And that is working for the people of riding and working for the issues that are important. And maintenance of hospitals and construction of new ones when necessary is important for across the province. And I am sure that it is one of the issues that is very relevant in his riding. And that's why he's going to the effort of putting forward a private member's motion to bring attention to that, and I commend him for that. And it's also my job as a representative from my area to spend a few minutes to talk about hospitals in my area. And I have 7. In Northern Ontario, our population is small per kilometre, but our kilometres are large. Our number of kilometres are large. So my riding is about 7 hours long and 5 hours wide in driving time. And my 7 hospitals, I'm just going to name them, just so I'm also representing my folks. And in Cochrane, I've got the Lady Minto Hospital. In Iroquois Falls, I've got Anson General Hospital. In Matheson, the Bingham Memorial Hospital. And those 3 hospitals are governed by one group, the Mixed Group. They did this years ago. Before people started talking about amalgamating things, the leaderships of these 3 hospitals thought, you know what, we can actually provide better service to our resident base if we consolidate the administration, which they did. They did this, they were years ahead of the curve. And it's not easy, but they have been leaders in that area. I'd like to commend them for that. Other hospitals in my area, Kurgan Lake and District Hospital, and Inglearton District Hospital, which is, I used to be on the board of Inglearton District Hospital, and they are also in the process of amalgamating their administration, and it's under the Blanche River Health Partnership. If you go down the road another half an hour, you will come to the Temiskaming Hospital. And if you go down the road another 2 hours, you will have the West Nipissing Hospital. And those 7 hospitals are, I'm sure, as the hospitals in Mr. Wilson's riding, often the only place where help is available 24 hours a day. And that's what makes hospitals so incredibly important in rural Ontario. We find and we know that a lot of the services that people take for granted in urban population, and which they deserve. I am not anti-urban population at all. But a lot of those services aren't available in rural and Northern Ontario. The only service that's available, the only lights that are on, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, are the lights at the hospital. And that's why it's so important to make sure that hospitals across the province, big ones, highly specialized ones, medium-sized ones that serve small cities, smaller ones, and the tiny, that we realize the different roles that they fill and how important they are to their populations, and how by working together they create a part of a healthcare system of which we can all be truly proud. So in closing from our portion, once again I would like to commend the member from, I know him as Jim, but the member from Simcoe Grey on bringing this forward so we all have an opportunity to talk about what's important. And as you know, and this is truly a non-partisan issue. We are trying to bring, he is trying to bring light to his area. I brought light to mine. We have philosophical differences both with his party and certainly with the government. But we should all work together on issues like this, and that's why we are in strong support of this motion. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Here's further debate. I recognize the member from Ottawa South.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And it's a pleasure to speak to the motion put forward by the member from Simcoe Grey, who I've had the opportunity to work with on a few things and got to know him over my time in the legislature. And I also know he's former Minister of Health, so he understands these things really, really well. And I do want to start by speaking about, and I want to commend him for putting forward a motion and supporting his community. I want to talk a little bit about the capital planning process. I too have been on the end of that process in working for a member and as a member. And as a member across would know, it is a very deliberative and multi-stage process that, I know I have become impatient with it at times, and understand my community has. But I've also come to understand in the work that I've been able to do here as the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Health, the reason for that deliberative process, which is you're building a facility that's got to meet the needs for sometimes 30, 40, 50 years. And you want to make sure that you get not just the design of your building right and your community contribution in place, but also what are the needs of your population going to be? Who else is in that environment? And so it's it's an iterative process that goes back and forth and back and forth. And I know the member opposite and other members opposite have probably seen this well. And I think that process, as impatient as I have been with that at times, is critical to make sure that we get it right, and critical to make sure that investment, because we're often talking about tens or hundreds of millions of dollars that are being invested in healthcare, be spent rightly and correctly. So, while I commend the member for bringing it forward, I also recognize that we got to get it right, and that there's an issue of balance. We all have needs in healthcare in our communities. I mean, I think every member here could stand up and speak for 10 minutes about what they need for their communities, about what their communities are asking them to bring forward. And I'm sure that all members opposite know as well too that it's all about choices and planning. And those choices aren't always easy or black and white, and sometimes they are not exactly what a community envisions. But what you end up with once you make the right choice by informing yourself is the best investment that you can make for your community. So, Speaker, I do want to say a few things about the investments in the budget that we put forward, especially with regards to capital over the next 10 years in hospitals across Ontario. So there's another $9 billion, Speaker, in this budget over the next 10 years, bringing to $20 billion the investments in capital in hospitals over the next 10 years. That's a lot of money. That's a historic investment, and I think that will serve the people of the province well. As well, Speaker, I think it's also critical, member, in terms of choices, the choices that we've made in this budget with regards to healthcare by investing more money in the operational increase for hospitals this year, but also to OHIP Plus, pharmacare for children and youth. So if you're under 25, after January 1st, you bring your prescription to the pharmacy, you bring your OHIP card, and you leave. No deductible, no co-payment. That's a choice that we made, and I think it's a critical choice that will support families, in Ontario in a way that's never been done before. As importantly, I think, Speaker, that's a clear statement about the need for us to get to universal pharmacare. And I think that's critical. I think it's critical in this country that we all come together, all provinces and the federal government, using some leadership to ensure that every Canadian, every Ontarian, has access to the medications that they need. That's really what universality is all about. You know, medications and pharmacy play a bigger role in cure of disease and maintenance of health than they ever did before. So when we look at the budget and we look at the investments that we've made, we know that there are choices. And we must make those choices well. We must get the information that we need to make the right choices. And as I can understand the member's sentiment and his advocacy for his community, I think that we have to look at the processes that we put in place that ensure that we spend that money wisely and invest in communities, not only for their needs of today, but tomorrow and on. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Further debate. Further debate. I recognize the member from Simcoe.
York Simcoe.
Grey Simcoe, sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it's my pleasure to be able to rise today to speak to the resolution brought forward by the member for Simcoe Grey. This resolution calls on the government to step forward to provide planning grants to get started on the next stage of development. And other speakers have made reference to this, so you understand at this point when I'm speaking about it, it's the same planning grants. Both Collingwood and Alliston hospitals have completed stage 1. Both of these hospitals have the support of their respective LHINs. And so I'm here today to join in supporting my colleague, the member for Simcoe Grey, in his pursuit to lead the change. I have to disclose my bias, though. As the member for York Simcoe, I know how important the Stevenson Memorial Hospital is to many of my constituents. Yet people realize Stevenson Memorial has many deficiencies. It was designed to serve 7,000 people back in 1964. Well, that's 50 years ago, 50 plus. And when you think of the kinds of medical technology and resources that are available to us, if we can afford them, if we can get the building and things like that. But the point is that the dispensing of medical care and the population growth are two things at loggerheads here. Such examples include meeting the standards of the fire code with the current hospital building is problematic, as it has been grandfathered. Medical surgical rooms are below needed space standards, again forcing medical equipment into the hallways and compromising patient privacy and infection standards. The hospital electricity systems are at capacity, and newer technologies require upgrades to the electrical infrastructure to keep standard. These are sort of the bread and butter fundamentals of being able to provide this kind of health care in the 21st century. So we're not looking at anything more than what people have come to understand are the important tools and technology of the kind of medical services that we're providing. And it even gets down to the parking lot and leaving people, patients and visitors, aimlessly wandering to find a parking spot. So in the few moments that I have, I want to also express my gratitude to the hardworking staff at Stevenson Memorial, who work to serve our communities despite these challenges. Most of all, I want them to have the tools that they need to succeed when it comes to looking after those who need it most, and some of them are my constituents. So let's get Stevenson Memorial to the next stage so they can do what they do best, provide care to our communities. I'd also like to end my remarks with a quote from Simcoe Warden Marshall. Building a long-term plan to ensure Simcoe County residents have access to the health care services they deserve is vital to the health care for the well-being of our communities. When all levels of government come together to create sustainable success for our health care centres and long-term care facilities, everyone wins. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate. Further debate. Further debate. I recognize the member from Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. pleasure to stand in support of my esteemed colleague and the former Minister of Health from Simcoe Grey. And similar to him, we've had the Markdale Hospital 14 years in the making. Markdale, the residents have worked very hard to raise $12 million toward their new hospital. And that new Markdale Hospital, very similar to Collingwood and Alliston Stevenson Memorial, it was currently a deteriorating facility, needed new building to ensure the safety, the health, the early diagnosis and care, which is paramount to everyone, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the current Minister, Minister Hoskins, for recommitting and making sure we're moving forward with that, and it is moving forward. We are actually in stage 2, and I'm going to hold him to his word to make sure that it does go forward, that we do actually build Markdale. I believe they're looking at a 20 to 21 timeframe. Facility operational start dates for the new hospital will be confirmed at a later capital planning stage. So we're in a relatively similar process that my colleague is going for. I commend him. As the former minister, he absolutely knows what needs to be done. He was in charge of our hospitals and did a great job at that point to ensure we had that care. And particularly in our small rural communities, it is truly the lifeblood of our community. People need that care. They need timely access to care. They need facilities that they can depend on that are close to home, not just because of their own care, but for the ability of their families, the spin-off economics from all of the staff that are there, and we all have wonderful staff in our small rural hospitals, but paramount to everything is absolutely the quality care close to home. I applaud him. I hope the government will forget anything of partisan reality and say this is what's needed. If they can find $25 billion to give short-term hydro relief, surely to goodness they can find money for a planning grant for both the Collingwood and Alliston Stevenson Memorial. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Further debate. I recognize the member from Niagara West Glenbrook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As always, it's an honour to stand in this place and represent the fine constituents of Niagara West Glanbrook, and it's especially an honour today to rise and speak in support of the member for Simcoe Grey's motion, a very valuable motion that draws attention to the importance of renewing infrastructure, especially healthcare infrastructure in our rural communities, and in this case, specifically to the planning grant requested by the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital in the town of Collingwood and the Stevenson Memorial Hospital in the town of New Tecumseh. Madam Speaker, I was fascinated to hear him speak about how these hospitals were built in the late 1950s and the early 1960s, because as we know, in my community of Niagara West Glanbrook, we have the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital, which was built in 1948. So, the honourable member, I think I should have precedence when it comes to new hospitals.
That's not reasonable.
But I want to commend him for the excellent work that he's done promoting this. Obviously, these hospitals are fundamentally important to the fabric and the basis of communities, and in this case, more remote communities. And the healthcare that is provided obviously needs to not only come across in a, as he said, a tender, loving manner, but also one that has the capacity and the modern equipment that is deserved by people across the province. Madam Speaker, in my riding of Niagara West Glanbrook, as I said, the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital has been pushed for years. We've been bringing petitions forward to the legislature. We've spoken about this before on Opposition Day motion to the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. In my community, we fundraised over $14 million, my apologies, towards a new redevelopment. And I think this motion again just brings to the fore the importance of ensuring we have those healthcare resources at the disposal of these rapidly growing rural communities. So I want to really take the time to thank all those who came out today from the riding of Bruce Grey. This is obviously something that's very important to a lot of members in that community. I want to again commend the member for Bruce Grey for his dedication. Simcoe, sorry, my apologies. My seatmate is from Bruce Grey. Simcoe Grey, for his dedication to his community and his hard work when it comes to healthcare, also in his prior tenure as the Minister of Healthcare. I look forward to supporting this motion, and I encourage all members to do so in this House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I will return to the member from Simcoe Grey to wrap up.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the 8 speakers. I won't go through all their names, but thank you very much from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of my constituents and the people of Simcoe Grey. We very much appreciate the thoughtful words, very kind words. And I just want to wrap up by saying, you talk about the need for hospitals, certainly in small-town rural Ontario. They were all built about the same time. My hospitals, though, have never had any major renovations, particularly Stevenson Memorial, nothing done. basically. Collingwood, very little done. The last renovation it got was a bit of a facelift. When I was Minister of Health, Madam Speaker, it had a $16 million small redevelopment done there. The buildings, as I said, they're overdue. And the way we look at it in Simcoe County is, in my 27 years, Barrie's been done twice. I opened the first Barrie Hospital. Bob Ray built it, but I opened the first new RVH. Attended the opening recently of the second RVH. Orangeville's been done. Mike Harrison and I opened Orangeville in 1996, I believe we were. I was Minister of Health. Owen Sound's been done in my time. So these are all the hospitals that my constituents go to if they don't go to Collingwood or Alliston. Newmarket's been done several times. Cardiac specialties down there now. I was part of the team that made the decision to put the cancer bunkers in Newmarket and Barrie at the same time. Barrie's now doing advanced cardiology, or just starting advanced cardiology. When you look at it, and I'm glad you mentioned the warden, and I want to thank the warden of the county. When I talk with him, we agree, and County Council agrees, that Collingwood and Alliston are the ones in the middle. They're actually in the riding of Simcoe Grey. Everyone's been done around us over the last 25 years. Brand new facilities. We're overdue. And I want to thank the county, because I didn't do it in my 12-minute remarks, for their support. We're number one on their list, both hospitals equally, in terms of the tens of millions that they're going to put forward, because they recognize that the Simcoe Grey hospitals need to be done, and they need to be done sooner rather than later.
Thank you. We will vote on this item at the end of private member